continue to submit questions. Our treasurer in the back will be gathering questions. He'll bring them up to me. And we'll continue for as long as we have questions or until we run out of time. One more thing, I'd like to announce that there are goodies up front provided by the high school hospitality class. Wonderful desserts, water, and coffee. They're all free, so please go and have some. So we're going to handle this way. Each candidate will get 2 minutes to make an opening statement. Then I will go through the questions, and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. And then at the end, they will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. So let me introduce our candidates. Tommy Howe over on the right. Dan Grasson in the middle. And Lee here on the left. So I know there people they have a lot of fans here, but I would ask you not to clap during the forum. You can clap at the end. Thank all of them for coming, but I'd like to keep this so we can focus on the answers to the question. So our timekeeper, Eric Holbeck, is right here. Eric will hold up a hand, one finger, and halfway through, 2 fingers when you're done, right? Like this, you really want to stop. So with that, we will proceed. I have a number of very good questions that were submitted in advance, as well as questions that were submitted here. So what we'll do is we'll start with Tommy on the right. We'll go through this way, and then with each question, we will shift one over, starting with the next candidate, so they will alternate for second and third. So starting with Tommy, what are your plans for Mira Mesa natural resources, such as vernal pools, canyons, and open space?
Oh, I'm happy to answer that question, but do we get an opening remarks first?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Okay, Tommy, opening remarks, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. And it's great to see everyone tonight. I'm Tommy Howe. I'm running for San Diego City Council here in District 6, obviously. I live in Mira Mesa over at the end of Flanders by Wagenheim Middle School over at Baywood. And I've been looking forward to this event tonight, in part because we are finally getting a chance, as Barry said, to meet in person once again. So let me tell you really quickly about myself. I think many of you know me, but for those of you who don't, I used to be a radio host. I was most recently on the air at 91X. I was also on at KPRI, which is part of the reason I wound up living in Mira Mesa. And I also worked for 10 years at FM 94.9. I've been a Democrat my entire life. I became a Democrat when I turned 18 years old. And I followed a career mostly in broadcasting. And when I got to San Diego, one of the things I did when I was working for the Jefferson Pilot Cluster in Mission Valley was I served as the cluster's public affairs director. And I really became familiar and acquainted with a lot of individuals who work with nonprofits and community organizations around the city. And it really was a great way to sort of get very, very familiar with the city as well and meet a lot of people. And that way, I sort of eased my way into politics. I was the endorsed Democratic candidate for the District 6 seat back in 2018. We're really focused on infrastructure, on roads, on housing, on really putting an emphasis on affordable housing so our neighbors and our kids and grandkids can actually stay here in the community. But I want to talk real quickly in the time I have left about the roads issue. Of course, we're all familiar with the realignment that occurred on Gold Coast Drive last month. During all the hubbub, when the helicopters are flying over and the drones are going down the street taking pictures, one of our neighbors, one of my supporters on Antra, one of the most abused and neglected roads here in Mira Mesa, put a sign out along Gold Coast Drive saying, "Fix our roads." Because our neighbors have been desperate to get 24 roads, not just Gold Coast and Parkdale, but about 24 roads rebuilt here on an emergency status. That is a real crisis, and we shouldn't have our neighbors having to beg for attention from the city like that. That's part of the reason I'm running, and I'm glad to be here tonight. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Tommy. Dan?
Hello? Hey, it works. I usually sing karaoke, so I'm not
I'm used to singing instead of talking in front of people. I want to thank Barry Landry Voss. I want to thank the Mira Mesa Town Council. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm Jane L. Glasson. I am a candidate. I appreciate Daniel Kiley. Thank you for all you do, Mr. Kiley. I'm a candidate for San Diego City Council District 6. I've been in Mira Mesa since 1998 when I bought my condo. I have worked at Mira Mesa High School since 2010. I have known thousands of folks in Mira Mesa. I'm hoping to represent you as your next council member. I started as a Democrat because my dad was a Democrat. Now I'm a Republican. I've been a Republican for years now, several years. I have worked at Mira Mesa High School since 2010 as a special education assistant. Currently I work in biology classes and history classes. I want you to know that Mira Mesa High School was just awarded the California Pivotal Practice Award for 2022. Great school. Thanks. I have loved giving my best here. Now it is my hope that I can represent you on the San Diego City Council. My education, I'm a graduate of Torrey Pines High School, Maricosta College, Palmer College, and San Diego State University. I have 2 associate in arts degrees, general studies, and foreign languages. I know Spanish and French. I speak Spanish a lot. At SDSU, I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Applied Arts and Sciences and Child Development, and I graduated with this distinction in the major Child Development. My priorities are as follows: restore public safety to numbers needed to protect neighborhoods, fix streets and potholes, maintain parks, support businesses, protect beaches. I'm a leader with experience and commitment. I volunteered as treasurer of my community association, and in college I volunteered as a chapter officer. Do I still have time or am I? Okay. I was membership secretary and point secretary at Palmer College. I graduated Phi Theta Kappa and Alpha Gamma Sigma. I'm really happy to be here tonight. I think County House is great. I think Kent Lee is great. It's really great to be among you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane. Ken?
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. And first off, just thank you to the Mira Mesa Town Council for hosting tonight's in-person forum. And it's really great to see people back in person in general. So maybe just a little bit of an introduction about myself. My name is Kent Lee. I am a candidate running for San Diego City Council to represent District 6. My background really comes from one as the son of immigrants. So my mom actually came to the United States as a refugee from Vietnam. Her family escaped from the war there. And she actually ended up traveling alone across the country before she settled in Southern California. My dad and his family, when he was 12, ended up coming from Burma. And my dad and his brothers came to the United States with only about $20 collectively amongst themselves in their pockets. And what they found was that they really needed to work to create the opportunities that they needed, not just for the family, but also for us as their kids growing up. And that's really shaped my personal belief, which is that life is a lot more than just about looking at what you can accomplish for yourself, but it's about what you do when you get the opportunity to serve and how you create opportunities for the future and your future generations as well. My background is rooted specifically in service. My family and I have actually lived here at D6 for the last 15 years. We are 2 working parents in a household with 2 toddlers, aged 2 and 4, and I think our experiences have shown that we've seen a lot of the frustration and experienced the same anxiety as many of you, looking at rising costs when it comes to prices at the pump, at the grocery store, or even trying to keep a roof over our heads. And I think that shows that we need community-based experience and leadership that's going to navigate us out of these tough economic times. So my background is specifically in the nonprofit community. I currently serve as the executive director of Pacific Arts Movement, which presents the San Diego Asian Film Festival. Before that, I worked with the Boy Scouts of America, covering San Diego and Imperial counties. I'm currently on a number of nonprofit community organizations. I also serve as a member of the Mira Mesa Community Planning Group. And ultimately, what I'm looking to bring is a sense of collaboration to what we can do to solve many of our city's challenges. I look forward to working with many of you in the months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we will go on to our first question. And we will start with Tommy, and then alternate after that. First question: what are your plans for Mira Mesa natural resources, such as vernal pools, canyons, and open space?
Leave them alone, I think, is the best thing we can do. We have some really special places here in Mira Mesa. One of the fascinating things about Mira Mesa is that we've actually made it a point to go and protect a lot of our vernal pools and a lot of our open space. You know, when Mira Mesa was originally built in the early 1970s, the area was built so quickly. Frankly, it was built on vernal pools with a lot of loose soils and poor drainage, and as a result, it wasn't really a consideration to go and preserve canyons. It wasn't really a consideration to go and preserve old oak trees and old oak groves and certainly chaparral. But vernal pools have really proved to be a really special and wonderful resource. And so I'm glad they've been set aside. And as far as our larger areas of protected habitat, multiple species conservation program with the city actually is pretty comprehensive. It does a pretty good job of preserving places, not just like Penasquitos Canyon, which is actually a county resource, but other areas as well. And I'm absolutely opposed to the idea of building an office park in the bottom of Carroll Creek. I think it's absurd in an area that's going to wind up flooding. That's not appropriate. It's dangerous for our first responders. So, and it's really going to wipe out a very special vernal area.
1 minute for the response.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Jeff. I apologize. You have to rigidly time politicians because we will just pole vault right past the time. So I apologize.
That's why we have Eric.
I see it, Eric.
Okay, so the next one has several questions along this line. Question is potholes. We know that the road repair budget is managed by the mayor's office.
Hey. Yeah.
You're right. Sorry.
That's the same question everybody got.
Okay, well now you know what the next question's going to be.
So
Question
I'm
Back to
is,
the first one.
what are your plans for Mira Mesa natural resources such as vernal pools, canyons, and oaks?
I really like Tommy Howe's answer. It's so good. I mean, how do you add to it? We need to preserve our open spaces, and gosh, when you go near those spaces, the air quality is so good. I mean, I walked over to Rancho Penasquitos. I walked around University City, where the single-family homes, and the air is just so good. We have to take care of our climate, and that air is really contributing to our quality. I mean, yes, so the more we take care of open spaces, the better. Thank you very much.
Ken?
Yeah, I'm a believer that we also need to, especially coming as a parent of 2 young kids and thinking about the world that we're leaving them, I often think about how we're going to actually ensure that we have a world that we're going to be proud to pass on. I think that means ensuring that we protect our natural resources, which not just is open space, but really thinking about the air that we breathe, also the water that we have, which we know that anyone in California at the moment knows that is a resource that is becoming more and more scarce that we have to be considerate of. I think also as we're looking at our communities, we've got to consider the opportunities we have to ensure we have additional green space. I know that's something that, as a member of the Mira Mesa Community Planning Group, that's something that we've emphasized, especially as additional developments have come online, to ensure that we have not just passive green space, but active recreation space that we can ensure that our future generations will enjoy in decades.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this will start with Jane. Question is potholes. We know that the road repair budget is managed by the mayor's office. What will you do to, 1, get Mira Mesa's fair share of that budget, and 2, attract new technologies to better repair our roads?
Well, with the experience that I have being on a board at my community association, I realize I have to work well with the other people. Teamwork makes the dream work. So I do my best to work with the mayor and the other council members. I talked to someone and she said that Gold Coast and Jade Coast have to be repaired. They have to be repaved. And she wanted me to promise that they would be taken care of. And I made her promise that I would do my best with Gold Coast and Jade Coast. And I also noticed that Mira Mesa Boulevard is speed up at times. You know, I speed up a lot. Now, I take the buses, bus 964, bus 921A. When we go on Gold Coast, wow, it is like a very bumpy Disneyland ride, I tell you. Thank you.
Ken?
Yeah, so I think I've talked to thousands of folks knocking on doors, and the one thing you hear the most here in Mira Mesa is certainly our roads. And there's no question that we have a lot of work to resolve that. And it's not just about repaving it. I think when you talk to folks at the door, you recognize that there are streets that have been paved multiple times just within the last 5 years, which is mind-boggling. When you have other streets that folks have lived on for 25 plus years that haven't even been touched. And I think that says a lot about how our city actually not only budgets for infrastructure, but how we prioritize it. So one thing I'm really heartened by is knowing that this year our mayor in his budget proposal has actually project or propose to increase the streets repair budget that we have from $50 million to $77 million, which is a significant increase. I'm proud to be supported by this mayor, and I believe that I'm going to be able to negotiate to get those resources delivered to communities like here in Mira Mesa, where we've been here for 50 years, and we certainly still need the same kind of investment that we see unequally applied across our region. And if we're going to make any impact on that, it's going to come at the table, working with our peers and with the mayor to ensure that those funds get delivered here.
Ken, Tommy?
My opponent has not spoken with thousands of people at the door, but I can tell you that I have. And I can tell you that other than really public safety, the concern about infrastructure and roads is overwhelmingly the biggest concern that we have around here. In fact, when you speak with people, when you actually talk with people and you mention you're looking after the roads and trying to get them rebuilt, the first thing they do is they do what? They chuckle. Because they know exactly what you're talking about, because we all avoid Mira Mesa Boulevard. If you live in Mira Mesa, you find all the other routes to go and get around the community. Gold Coast Drive, Parkdale are a disgrace. They're a disgrace to the city, and it's a demonstration of how left behind this community has been left by a city hall, frankly, where a city council is not behaving the way as they should, as a counterweight with the mayor. If city council is Congress, the mayor is the president. And right now, I don't really see a particularly activist council. I see a council that's working often in tandem with the mayor and often winds up going in directions that leave us behind. If that wasn't the case, then our roads would have been addressed decades ago. If that wasn't the case, we would have had our side. I apologize. Thank you so much. I appreciate the question on that. I hope we get another question about that.
All right, start with Ken on this one. How do you plan to help residents not be held captive by high rates of SDG&E?
Thank you for this question, whoever asked it. We know, we've seen the reports. So SDG&E and our rates here in San Diego are the highest in the country. And that's mind-boggling. And it's actually much more complicated than just dealing with SDG&E. One of the big things that we need to be sure to do as a city is understand that these rates are regulated at the state level with the Public Utilities Commission. And if you look at the Public Utilities Commission, what you find is that currently there are no representatives on it from Southern California. And of the members that are on it, San Diego as a city, despite being as large as we are, has done very little to lobby them on what needs to be done in looking at our rates. That's something I know the city is working on now, and it's something we need to be much more proactive on if we want to ensure that those rates are controlled in a way that will be beneficial for all of us here in San Diego, and not just be controlled by someone up in San Francisco. Thank you.
Tommy?
San Diego Gas and Electric has its pockets in the hand of many council members downtown. My opponents received money from some individuals who work for SDG&E. Anyone who takes money from SDG&E owes their neighbors an apology or has to explain why it's okay for this utility why it's behaving like a monopoly, and it is gouging every resident in this city. If I'd been elected back in 2018, I would have been the deciding vote against the San Diego Gas and Electric 20-year franchise extension. The city really got nothing, and we are the 8th biggest city in the United States, and we can't leverage better than that. I will hold SDG&E accountable. I will ask questions. I will ensure that we are getting concessions from them, and I will help tee up the council so that when we come to the 10-year mark, we can go back and do some renegotiating with the deal and get something out of it. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to make sure that rooftop solar stays, because this utility is trying to undo it. That is inappropriate. We cannot have a utility that's a fossil fuel company that's trying to do everything they can to subvert rooftop solar. I will defend it.
Thank you. Jane?
I like Tommy, I like your answer. I have not accepted any money from SDG&E, and I won't. In fact, I'm funding my own campaign. I'm very glad I can do that. I would never take money from SDG&E. I like the idea of solar panels, and I really appreciate that Mira Mesa High School has those at the parking lot. Now, I live at Mirabella, and someone asked if we could have solar panels, and the majority of the board said no. I said I wanted it, but hey, it's a majority of the board. I care a lot about keeping expenses low, and SDG&E should bring down their rates. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next question. We will start with Tommy. What will you do about the lack of affordable housing in our district?
That's a great question. In fact, that's really the question that's been coming up quite a bit lately. So I know many of you have heard about my proposal and my idea to really neighborhoodize Miramar. I think we have an opportunity to bring transit down from the Blue Line down Miramar Road, the trolley down to Scripps Ranch. We have an opportunity to actually build within the built environment and the footprint of Miramar and actually get housing in an area where the jobs are or very near, instead of upending other communities like South University City and upending their zoning entirely. Instead, we should be looking at also the new Kearney Mesa Community Plan update. We've got great opportunities there, especially for densification in conjunction with the transit center. Again, you're near the freeways, you're near the job sites, but Miramar, that's the real opportunity. And who could argue if we could build affordable housing right up the hill from 3 Roots, that wouldn't be a benefit for this community. That's something that I've been very, very supportive of. And I'm not talking about 20-story towers, but certainly 4 stories or 5 stories potentially added on to some of those pre-existing buildings there or in those parking lots. Thank you.
James?
Can you repeat the question, please? Because I know it's about affordable housing, but can you please
The
repeat?
question is, what will you do about the lack of affordable housing in our district?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but I would not do anything to Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. We need that military base, especially with what's happening with Ukraine being bombed. We have to be careful that we are ready for anything. I do appreciate bus 31 that goes through Miramar. It only goes there Monday through Friday, though. It'd be nice to have something that goes through Saturday and Sunday. Trolleys are great. I go on the trolleys a lot, but there's also crime that comes with it, especially at night. There are sexual predators on trolleys sometimes. I see them on buses as well, and we just don't want crime coming into our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Ken?
I want to thank whoever submitted this question. When you talk to folks at the door, housing does come up, and it's very different depending on people's perspectives. And certainly what we've heard from residents is the fear that, especially as rental housing costs have even increased, that it makes the idea and the possibility of homeownership even more challenging. There's a reason why we can't build in Miramar. It's simply because we have a base there. If you look at the map that the base has, that restricts density as well as height and noise within the region. It tells you exactly why you can't build in Miramar. Really, I think there are 3 things that we can do when it comes to housing affordability. One is to really strategize where we have the opportunities, aligning our housing policy along with transit infrastructure across the region. That's especially true in the Kearney Mesa area. We need to do a better job of utilizing public lands. The county is currently doing that right now with MTS. They're talking about building 10,000 affordable housing units in partnership using that public land. The city certainly has opportunities to do the same thing. And then finally, the last piece I believe that often is not talked about is housing finance, both on the side of the cost of housing and how challenging it is to build, but also the cost for home buyers and what we can do to support them to give them the opportunity to own. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, next question, we'll start with Jane. What is your stance on ADUs, and do you support the work of neighbors for San Diego?
What's an ADU?
Accessory dwelling unit, granny flat?
That's not a term I use a lot. Can you help me a little bit here?
Oh, sure. So an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit in the city parlance. It used to be called granny flats. Basically, it's a smaller house that you build in your backyard. And the city has been encouraging these as a way to housing.
Thank you very much. One thing I'm concerned about very much is what's happening in University City, and I'm concerned it could spread to Mira Mesa and other areas, and that is that single-family homes, it may be changed, the rezoning may be changed, so people can turn a single-family home into a place with 4 different homes in it, and people are concerned that the property values will drop, and they're also concerned that there may be fewer lanes to drive on. There are 2 lanes could become 1 lane, and I hope that nothing happens like over next to the elementary school on Gold Coast, where it was turned into 1 lane for cars with 2 bike lanes on the sides and cars swerving into the bike lanes to avoid hitting each other. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I think we know here, especially since we've talked about housing in our last answer, that housing is one of the most critical issues that we're facing at the moment in terms of making sure that housing is attainable for San Diegans at a variety of income levels. And I know that's what ADU policy is designed to try to promote. I was just chatting with a neighbor off north of New Salem the other day who was talking about how she has 2 young kids who are coming back from college, and she's really hoping that they find a way to stay in San Diego. And even then she explored building an ADU and found that the policies were actually challenging and the cost was really high for her to even explore that. ADU policy has changed a little bit this year. I think that's been heartening to see that the city is looking at data to ensure that if we implement policy, we're not simply rewarding investors in building. If we're gonna have real ADU policy to help support our housing crisis, we need to ensure that it's actually gonna be affordable and that it's gonna be available to the folks who actually need it here in San Diego. Thank you.
I like ADUs. You know, if you do have a situation where kids going back from college and they can't afford a place to live, if you have a situation with in-laws, I think it's actually a good idea. Now what happened though is that council wound up deregulating what were some otherwise very, very good ADU laws at the end of 2020. They shouldn't have done that, and so they've essentially made it a Wild West now, where you can build almost down to the sidewalk, you can build out to the edge of your property, and that's not really the way that ADUs were imagined. I don't think that's necessarily appropriate. In fact, look, my wife and I, we're building an ADU for my mother-in-law, literally, so I think it's a good idea. But, you know, you need to put a height limit back on there. You shouldn't be building 3 or 4 stories with an ADU. I don't think that's necessarily appropriate. There's a happy medium, and the best solution is to roll it back to where it was in 2020. That was the best regulations the city had. Those are the guidelines under which we are building our ADU, by the way. But let's remember, let's not forget, that this rush to go and build housing every place you can, ADUs do nothing to lower the cost of housing. Let's keep that in mind as we continue having this discussion.
Thank you. Go on to the next question. This is a rather long question, but it was submitted by a longtime resident, so I'm going to read the whole thing, and we'll start with Kim. Do you support keeping our neighborhood the family-centered community suburb that it has always been, with wonderful schools and lots of activities for children, teens, families, and seniors, with easy parking that makes everything more handicap accessible for our Asian community that bought into Mira Mesa at its beginning? Making it like downtown into an urban center, taking away parking makes the community unfriendly for those who are handicapped and wanting to live independently. Purposely chose to stay in this community because it's a wonderful family-centered suburb where I could park easily to buy the things I need when I cannot walk. Please consider this, as this community has a wide variety of ages and physical abilities.
That is a long question. So maybe talking to the overall theme of it, we know at the moment that our communities are always growing. And I think as a part of that, what's important is how we actually implement that growth. What policies we put in place, how do we ensure that we are supporting our communities, ensuring that we have the resources, the facilities, the infrastructure that's needed to make Mira Mesa, but also all of San Diego, the livable place that we envision it being. We have 2 major developments happening right now in San Diego, right here in Mira Mesa. One that's currently, everyone's watching 3 Roots, another that's coming down the pike. And so for any of us to try to promise you that we're simply going to keep your neighborhoods the same isn't actually feasible, but what we should be promising is that as our communities grow, we do it in a smart way, that we ensure that we, with our community groups like the planning group, fight for resources that are delivered here within Mira Mesa, that we fight to ensure that we have parks, libraries, schools that are built to serve our neighborhoods, because that's how we're going to have the same kind of livable community that we're continuing to see, not only to keep it the same, but to build it and make it better.
Thank you. Comment?
Well, as long as that question it wasn't an all or nothing question. I mean, you know, we are capable of growing as a community, but I think what the question is really asking is, do you support single family zoning? Yes, I support single family zoning. I am the candidate that will protect single family zoning. If we want to have an ADU in the backyard, I think reasonable people can get to where we were back in 2020. Obviously, as Ken indicated, we have a couple of new developments coming in with 3 Roots and Stone Creek. That's part of the Mira Mesa community plan. We're clearly in place. We're going to be able to accommodate that. But the volume of housing that the city has been calling for does mean a bit of a refiguring of how we're going to be looking at Mira Mesa. And the one question that is never answered is, where are all the cars going to go? From this volume of people coming to our community, where will the cars go? We're going to have at least 6,000 units alone going into Carroll Canyon. So we've got 20,000 new units going into the Target parking lot, the Vaughn's parking lot, the movie theater parking lot. I think we can accommodate some of that, but we have no effective transit and our roads are in terrible shape. Please, the city has got to stop putting carts in front of the horse again and again.
Okay?
You know, I really appreciate seeing the question in front of me. Is I didn't know if I have that card in front of me, please. Thanks. Thank you. And first, I also want to say that, well, I think that some ADUs are good. Like, I have a friend, and she had an ADU built in her yard so that she could live there and her children could live in the house, her children and grandchildren. So yes, I think ADUs can be good. And I think Tommy brought up a really good point for his family. Supporting family, yes, I definitely think that's important. And if it doesn't change the way the neighborhood is, where people go like, oh my gosh, why did this happen next to my home? If the neighbors like it, then great. And I'm sure that neighbors would appreciate that they could have more generations of the family living there. I appreciate I appreciate our parks, but you go to Mira Mesa, the community park, and it is so beat up. There are people who play soccer, children who are playing soccer on it. They can so easily get injured because.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, one more housing question. We'll go to Tommy first. The city is proposing to add 24,000 housing units to the Mira Mesa community plan, which will double the current population. If the city proceeds with this plan, what public facilities and infrastructure should be required to support the increased population?
Okay, so we lost our developer impact fees. So as a community, we're not really even able to go and leverage what we may be getting out of development anymore. You know, one of the things about 3 Roots was that, you know, we got a park, we got a recreation center out of that. That's magnificent. But because we lost those developer impact fees, and because downtown's sort of building the slush fund around it, we don't necessarily have access to that anymore. And that's going to really be a problem, because at the same time, you've got a lot of interests and a lot of folks even on council talking about curbing the influence of community groups. I will support community groups, and I think that if downtown is not listening to the concerns and the needs of the neighborhood, and we saw that they don't when it happened with the Gold Coast Drive realignment. We saw that they're not listening to a lot of neighbors with South University City. Then I'd be very, very concerned as to how those 24,000 units could be applied. After all, some of the city's numbers are saying, well, if you live in a smaller unit, then somehow you're using less water. What does that mean? So somebody who lives in a 900 square foot apartment is taking shorter showers, where did that number even come from? There's a lot of questions that have got to be answered about that. The city needs to be more transparent with them.
Okay?
Thank you. 24,000 housing units. Yes, we have to support people who live here, and people need homes. I just wish that we could do a better job. Like I work at Marabella. I'm sorry. I work there. I volunteer when I'm on the board. I'm not on the board now, but I plan to get back on it in September if people elect me. We have 208 units. What's it like? 8 units in one building. Wow, if someone has the water turned off for plumbing, well, we don't get water. Part of the building falls off. What do? We just wait and wait until the majority board finally decides to fix it. If you look at Marabella from New Salem Street, it's not good. I helped to save a laundry room. Majority of the board wanted to get rid of it. I helped so the whole place would be repainted. I was the one who made the motion, and someone seconded it, and there were 3 of us, and so I'm glad that it happened. But I tell you, we don't have much of a voice, especially when we're not on the board.
Ken?
I've had the opportunity to serve on the Mira Mesa Community Planning Group for the last 9 years, and also to be part of the process as the community looks at the plan update. And I think what's really important to note is that when we're looking at the growth of this community, there are a lot of needs that we have to match the potential of all these 24,000+ units that we're talking about. I started making a list, and it's basically everything that we can think of. We're going to need streets to be completed. One of the big components with the new developments we have is ensuring that Carroll Canyon Road, which is drawn in the community plan, is completed from the 805 to the 15 to help mitigate some of the traffic that we would anticipate. We need schools, working with Sandy Unified to ensure that we have the growth available for the families that will be here. We need parks, something that this planning could spot for with every development to ensure that we have additional park space, considering we're short on the acreage. We only have one library serving 80,000 residents right now in Mira Mesa. And maybe the final thing I would just note is that we also need transit options. So if we're going to be building and adding additional development, we're not going to put all of that traffic on the roads. That's totally true. But it also means we need options that are going to be available, that are practical, not just one single bus route running across Mira Mesa as it is today. Thank you.
Thank you. So this next question asks you to answer the questions that you all just posed. This will start with Jane. Since the 1980s, developer fees have been assessed so that they pay for a specific list of projects defined in each developing community's community plan. The city recently repealed this community-specific developer fees and now allow developer fees assessed in Mira Mesa to be spent anywhere in San Diego. How can we pay for the remaining infrastructure in the Mira Mesa community that was planned to be paid for with FTA fees?
I really need, as a city council member, to talk with the other council members and the mayor and read all the information and send a lot of emails, make sure that I understand everything. Like, I have a lot of experience as when I served on the board at Mirabella, that there's a lot of reading and there needs to be a lot of communication with our management company. I just think communication is key and positivity is key, and I do my best to find out how to do better. Teamwork makes the dream work. I really want to do my best working with everybody as a team.
Thank you. Ken?
Equity has actually been a really big part of my campaign. I have believed that as part of building a better San Diego, that we also have to build one that's more equitable in the long run. And I know the city is implementing both plans for how it collects developer impact fees from a facility standpoint for parks, for example, but also our broader fees and pooling them. And I think one really important thing to note is that when the city has a lot of discussions around equity, oftentimes they talk about it as being north or south of the 8. And I'm not a believer in that geographical distinction, because there are pockets in every part of our communities, especially in Mira Mesa, in University City South, where we have communities that have been built decades ago that don't have the same facilities and infrastructure that newer communities like Carmel Valley have. And it means that we need to ensure that we are fighting to deliver those resources and leveraging every bit of power that we have to ensure that those resources are delivered back into our own communities, so that we see that disinvestment that we've had over decades gets balanced out. And I want to ensure that we are actually a beneficiary at the end of the day when it comes to equitable funding, not on the opposite side of that. Thank you.
Tommy?
Yeah, I don't think my opponent's answering the question about how you're going to wind up getting the fees and the funds back to this community. I agree that there are a number of areas in the city that have been left behind, that have historically not had parks, have been slow to go and get appropriate green spaces and open spaces. I absolutely agree with that. But the dynamic that we have now essentially forces all of these interest groups and stakeholders to go downtown and essentially go fight it out before the mayor's office. I don't think this is the way we ought to be doing it. I would try and repeal at least that component of the parks plan and at least get developer impact fees back in the hands of the communities. If not, as your council member, it's going to be my job to go to the mat, as Councilmember Kate did actually with the Kearney Mesa Community Plan update, and ensure that we are at least fighting for those monies and dollars that we're going to need, because we're going to need that when they wind up building Stone Creek, because this community has nothing to incentivize a developer to build a park that's going to be appropriate to the size and the number of people who are going to be living there.
Thank you, Tommy. Next question will start with Ken. you support having homeowners who are currently exempt from paying for trash collection start paying for trash collection?
So I think this is talking about the People's Ordinance, which is something that has been on the books for the city since 1919, and it's really interesting because when I first heard about it, I was sort of just surprised, and I think this is why it's being brought forward today. I think it's a fair question to pose back to our voters to see that the way our city's policy currently is outlined, it actually restricts the city from collecting fees for trash collection from anyone who has access to a city street. It means that as a result, we've actually bifurcated the system in which we deal with trash. As a single-family homeowner myself, the city picks up our trash. It's covered in the fees that we already pay as part of our taxes. If you're a resident living in an apartment, condo that doesn't have direct access to the street, what you find is that those facilities end up having to contract the service to someone else on top of the taxes that folks are already paying as well. If you ask me, I don't think that's an equitable solution in the grand scheme of things. I don't believe that means that we should simply turn around and start collecting trash fees from everyone, but I do think that the city needs to do a better job with trash collection to keep our trash cans from being destroyed all the time. And this is part of how we might be able to address it.
No, I don't support repealing the People's Ordinance, and I'll tell you why. It is the job of the city to do a number of things that we as residents are unable to do. We can't go and light our streets. We can't go and pave our own roads. We don't necessarily go and pick up our own trash. What this is a revenue matter, okay? The city does not have enough revenue. I'm the first to agree. We've got 30% vacancies across every single department. The police department was here tonight saying we've got openings. So we have a real crisis with the city as far as vacancies and filling our city departments fully. However, one of the things the city does is it picks up trash. That's a job that they have to do. It's a public health matter. So we already do pay that as part of a tax. That's part of the city taxes that we pay every year. So I think there are other opportunities to potentially go, and of course we always say that from the limitless bag of money, but I think that's one thing that was proposed by Council President Sean Elo Rivera, where I would certainly break with him on that.
Okay.
Yeah, like Tommy's answer, I think that the trash needs to be picked up. Like I know someone really cared about. I still do, of course. He owned a house. He would take his trash down to the beach so he could dispose of it there in a container, in a trash container, because he couldn't afford to have the trash picked up. And he did his best and worked hard, supported a family. The city should pick up the trash, and they shouldn't say that they won't because people won't pay them. We've been taxed, and the city, now, do you want to compare that to condo association? Yes, we contract to have our trash picked up, but it's part of our HOA fees. I pay $320 a month, and I don't always know what our board's going to do with it. I feel like we've been cheated as the majority of the board. They don't really treat us well when they take our money, $320 a month. It was $280 last year, so I don't know what they're doing.
All right, next question starts with Tommy. All of our main concerns, road repair, park maintenance, infrastructure improvements, homeless housing, transit, etc., have one common issue. They all require more money than we have. How can we obtain the money we needed to address these problems?
Well, as I just mentioned, we are facing a tremendous revenue crisis here in the city. Part of the problems that we have is that we pay far less than other municipalities around Southern California, around even the United States per capita. The fire and police departments are not just the only ones. City workers get paid far less. So we have an option with TOT taxes. We've talked about playing with TOT taxes before, potentially raising those. The only problem though is, and you got to find a way to get some more affordable hotels in downtown, because the big complaint about Comic-Con when they were trying to scare everyone into expanding the convention center was that they were going to leave. The problem isn't, according to Comic-Con attendees, that there aren't hotels. The problem is that they can't really afford them. Everything here is just exceptionally expensive, but all options are going to be on the table. It may be specific bond measures, but we're going to have to look at some pretty radical ideas, and it goes a lot further than just considering who winds up picking up the trash.
Please repeat the question again. Thanks.
Question is, all of our many concerns, road repair, park maintenance, infrastructure improvements, homeless housing, transit, etc., have one combination. They all require more money than we have. How can we obtain the money needed to address these problems?
I think we should look to the state of California. I go on social media and I hear that the state of California has so much money. Well, I also read like Supervisor Jim Desmond's comments that, hey, give the money back, you know? If California has a lot of money, they should give it back and put it back into their communities. Put it back into the city of San Diego and other cities and counties.
Thank you for this question. So the city actually has been dealing with this as a challenge for a long time. In fact, over the last 10 years, I think that's where things like property had come up, was with this idea that we would find ways to cut back. And what you're looking at right now is that we as a city in the last 2 years have actually been faring okay, largely because we've been relying on federal dollars through the American Rescue Plan. That's what we used to balance our budget in the last 2 years. And once that's passed, our structural budget deficit still remains. Which really means that we do need to find additional ways, sometimes to cut costs. And I do believe that as a city, I think people use plenty of examples. There are things that we do that continue to sort of drive up costs and has created a lot of questions about our efficiency and priorities. But at the end of the day, we do also have to look at how we're going to consider generating revenue. One of the reasons why TOT revenue has often been discussed is because it's a way to raise revenue on those who are visiting San Diego, not just amongst our residents themselves. But we also have to look at ways that we're going to support, for example, in a couple of years, our Parks and Libraries Foundations are looking for a way to support specifically parks and libraries, because many times when these budget crises, the first thing they cut.
Thank you. This one will go to Jane first. We have several questions here on homelessness. I'm going to read this one and I'll combine it with the others. Homelessness in Mira Mesa is growing, just as it is in most of San Diego. However, most funds and programs are targeted in downtown. What will you do to help Mira Mesa address the problem before it gets as bad as downtown?
I like that there was that grocery stores, when they have food that's still edible and they're not going to sell it anymore, that they donate it so that the homeless can, have the food. I think it's great and I wish that we had that in all communities so that people won't feel like they have to dig it out. I don't want them to have to dig it out of a trash can for food. I also see the homeless, a lot of homeless here in Mira Mesa. What are they doing with money that they're given? A lot of them are spending a lot of that money on lottery tickets, scratchers, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I like that there are clothing drives. I think that we should have a place in every community with clothing, free clothing, so that the homeless can go and get what size would fit them, and nice clothing. I think that we can we can get them food, we can get them clothing, and I hope that we can get them a nice place to sleep. Because at the old library, I tell you, they've broken windows, doors and windows are boarded up. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken?
So homelessness is one of the most complex challenges that we're facing as a community today. And I think we know that during the pandemic, it has only been exacerbated in some ways, and sometimes I really worry about if we're only yet to see some of the worst of it to come. I think we have to remember that at the end of the day, our homeless neighbors are people. They're our neighbors in many cases. And each of them deserve a response that's specific to their type of need. We know that right now we're starting to see a coordinated strategic response driven largely by the county, because that is where a lot of the responsibility as well as the funding goes. But that the responses need to be driven for the specific cases that we're seeing. If we have folks who are dealing with mental health, behavioral health issues, we need to get them the support that's needed to address those issues, not just to criminalize them, ticket them, cite them, and then see them back out on the street in the next 24 hours. We also need to really look at how we build additional permanent supportive housing to ensure that for those homeless who need more than just temporary shelter, have access to the support needed to give them the long-term road to recovery. And then finally, I think we all have to acknowledge that part of our solution needs to be in prevention as well. recognizing where we have the opportunities to solve the issue before we have to address our neighbors when they're on the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Tommy?
Yeah, you don't want to be creating more homeless situations by forcing people on the street, and that's one of the reasons why we get a little wary about it when we start talking about changing the zoning of neighborhoods. But let me take a larger step back here, because the only solution is permanent supportive housing. Because let me tell you something, it's not working right now. The status quo is not working. Making it a law enforcement issue is not effective, it's not functional. In fact, it's cruel. When those people were killed under that overpass in City College last year, people think they were getting out of the rain. No, they lived there. One woman, while she was at the hospital being tended to her injuries, the cops came and her father just died of COVID, and they took all of her stuff and they put it into the police station and said, well, go ask for the key. We can't treat people like this. We can't treat human beings like this. There is no easy solution for this. The best and only opportunity is to invest in permanent supportive housing, take the lessons we got from Houston and Salt Lake City and build on them and get the San Diego solution, because I'm going to tell you, it's not going to get any better, it's going to get worse. I refuse to see unsheltered people crying on the bus bench outside the 7-Eleven on Gold Coast. I don't want to see that again. I'm tired of it.
Okay. Okay, so this will start with Kent. So there's a question about, so in the last year, Mira Mesa has become a dangerous place to walk as the number of mentally ill and homeless has increased dramatically. Just yesterday, our path was blocked. We luckily avoided being assaulted by a volatile, unstable man. Police dispatcher said she has already received several calls regarding him. In the 20 minutes we were in the surrounding area, we did not see any police arrive to help the situation. How do you see remedying this situation? Let me just combine that. There's another one that asks how we would get more police officers. I guess the question is, how do we get more police officers in this area, and how do they handle all of the homeless situation?
Thank you. That is definitely a multifaceted question, especially when you added the second piece to it. So I think largely, again, it is mainly addressing homelessness. And I think as a city, one of the only lines of responses that we've had is typically to utilize the San Diego Police Department. And I think at this point, we should all agree that that is not the solution at all. In fact, what we've shown is that often leads to disparate income results in terms of how it impacts the folks that SCP is looking to address. If we're really going to make a dent on the issue, we need to actually work with partners within the community, fund data-proven strategies in which we're going to engage partners that are not law enforcement to actually do the outreach, to be there working with the homeless to ensure that we identify what the needs that they have are and to get them the support that they need. That's not to say that the police don't have a responsibility in that response as well, because at the end of the day, a crime is a crime, and I think we've actually seen, whether it's on Next Door or Mira Mesa Neighbors, we've seen the cases where someone who maybe was afflicted with homelessness did commit a crime, and that does need to be addressed, and that doesn't change.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, if you speak with law enforcement, the last thing they want to be dealing with is homelessness issues. I don't blame them. That's not necessarily why they became officers. And I think the woman who wrote that question, if I'm not mistaken, that's the person I think it is. I believe that she's handicapped, and so if there's someone who's menacing in her proximity, that's a very, very scary thing, because she may not be able to remove herself from that as quickly as some of us could. So again, it goes back to a true investment in permanent supportive housing. I simply don't see any other opportunity, but I do agree that we have got to remove law enforcement from that equation, have others who may be showing up, maybe more capable to deal with more of the 360 degrees regarding this, especially when people are experiencing PTSD from being homeless or from many of the crises that they face themselves that drove them onto the street in the first place. We need trained mental health advisors to deal with that. It's not going to be cheap, but it's something that this city and all these communities must invest in.
Jane?
I have met a lot of homeless people here in Mira Mesa. Some are very kind, some are dangerous. I'm nice to everybody. I know that they need food, they need clothing, they need people to care about them. They And there are homeless who are concerned that someone's going to do, they're concerned that the government's going to do something bad to them. They want a home. You gotta take care of them. And I'm hoping that there will be fewer homeless people. I know with the student vaccine mandate, there have been a lot of students who have not been able to finish with the school district as students. And I hope that we don't get more human trafficking, and I hope that we don't get more homeless. And I hope that we don't require the police to ever get vaccinated. Thank you.
Okay, next question will start with Tommy. One of the city's goals is to increase the use of public transit and bicycle. However, Mira Mesa was built to be car-centric. What will you do to either retrofit the community to be transit-friendly or to improve road conditions for cars?
Well, obviously, I wouldn't do what they did on the west end of Gold Coast Drive. That was crazy, and they wound up making the road unsafe for everyone. I've never seen a major American city do that, where you invite drivers to get into a head-on collision. And clearly the city saw the lawsuit coming down the pike on that, and they changed their tune on that very, very quickly. But let me answer the question. We are going to have a lot more neighbors coming into this community, so we have got to find a way to make it safer and more welcoming for individuals to get out of their cars and walk around. How often is someone struck on Mira Mesa Boulevard? Every couple of months somebody is killed. That is what I would describe as a high-speed, dangerous suburban space. I think we could retrofit that, potentially do some traffic calming on there, get some more trees, some more shrubs, and certainly in the areas where we've got those bicycle lanes built as part of the footprint, maybe put in some sort of protection between the motorists and the bicyclists to encourage folks to use that. Because really, if you're trying to get people out of their cars, you need to give people a way to get down the Sorrento Valley easily, or up to the base. But that's one option, and I'd be happy to speak with bicycle advocates and speak more about that, because we have to do that here in all these other communities too.
Okay.
Well, so can you please repeat the question, sir?
Question is, one of the city's goals is to increase use of public transit and bicycle. However, Mira Mesa was built to be car-centric. What will you do to either retrofit the community to be transit-friendly or to improve road conditions for cars?
I want to see what we can do for roads like Gold Coast and J Coast and Parkdale. I was walking on Parkdale and I was thinking, wow, how can the roads be this bad? Gotta take care of it. Now, about 1 block east of an elementary school was where I saw what Tommy was talking about when he was on the news. I just thought, wow. Why near an elementary school? I mean, if you were to see in the morning at the corner of Mira Mesa High School and the park, the students don't bike on the road. They bike in the crosswalk. They want to get away from the moving cars. I will say public transit, we have good public transit, but I wish we had better on the weekends. Like there's this lady, she had to complain for bus 921A to run again on Sundays. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. First off, we've talked a little bit tonight about how Mira Mesa is undergoing a community plan update, and with that, also planning for what our community might look like in the next 20 to 50 years. And that means as we're doing that update, it's an important time to look at how we address the mobility issues within our growing community. One of the things that we absolutely are missing is increased bus routes and frequency. I mean, there's really only one bus route going east to west, and the timing is not often enough for it to be friendly for folks who want to use it. I spoke with a neighbor the other week who was talking about how she actually takes the bus across Mira Mesa to go to UTC to take the blue line down to get to work, and how difficult that route has been for her. I think it also means that if we're going to look at implementing bike infrastructure, we need to do it with data-driven responses, and we also need to ensure that the city does a better job of communicating. I think there's no question that what we saw unfold here in Mira Mesa is a sign of how much work the city has to do when it comes to actually communicating, doing outreach, and engaging our actual community groups and neighbors before we implement major changes. Thanks.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Jane. This is another planning question. District 6 includes University City as well as Mira Mesa. This question is about University City. As the City of San Diego Planning Department has proposed a rezoning of over 900 existing single-family residential properties in University City to medium-density townhouses at 20 to 36 dwelling units per acre. Do you support this change to the community plan? Yes or no? Please explain.
No, I do not support it. I walked around the University City. I walked on several blocks to several houses, and I really appreciated those signatures. And none of the people I talked with wanted the rezoning. And they were also concerned that they might not have 2 lanes to drive on, that there might just be 1 lane. Oh my gosh. And they were also concerned that they might not be able to go to a hospital in time. And they also want this bridge. It's like a Regent's Bridge, so that they can get to places soon enough. Thank you. Oh, and they're concerned. I mean, I'm concerned that a trolley could go through there, Blue Line trolley. I'm concerned that might go to Governor, and I really don't want time to go up.
Thank you. Ken?
So I think I want to actually address really the broader issue that's brought up here, which is twofold. One is, again, a communication issue. I think the city surprised everyone in University City with a planning proposal change that I don't think anyone expected or even asked for. And one of the discussions that has come with that is that the city is trying to align their policy with state level policy, primarily through what's called SB 9. And I think this is something really important to note, because we can talk about defending single-family zoning, but the reality is that according to state law, with SB 9 passed as it is today, they have made significant changes to what we consider to be single-family zoning. And what really is missing on a lot of that is ensuring that we have local control and a local voice from the community and how our communities grow. I think how we ensure that our communities grow and how we plan for that growth is really important. It's not just in these broad changes that we want to make. Finally, I would note that the city has a lot of opportunities to look at housing development at the moment, and that's where our focus should be, primarily in areas like Mira Mesa, even north of University City with the trolley line. Thank you.
I want to make this clear. SB 9 has nothing to do with what is being proposed in South University City. What is being proposed in South University City is being driven by City Hall. That's a City Hall answer. Here's the non-City Hall answer. Why would you do the massive rezoning in South University City? It's an island. You've got Rose Canyon to the north, the 5 to the west, the 805 to the east, the 52 to the south. You've got one major east-west artery going into South University City. That's Governor Drive. So now you're talking about doing almost the wholesale rezoning of a single-family community that has been zoned as such since 1960. It's a classic example of you're fixing something that is absolutely not broken. So no, I do not support that proposal to rezone South University City, and I question the necessity for it. It seems punitive more than anything else. It would almost make more sense to do something like that in Mira Mesa, because we are not as much of an island as South University City is. I'm not saying that we should do that here in Mira Mesa, but I'm certainly saying that what's being proposed in South University City is counterintuitive.
Thank you. This will start with Ken. To motivate this, a lot of the ADU regulations, 69, a lot of these infill proposals are not requiring any parking. So this question is, parking is a huge concern for many in our neighborhoods. As we're aging, we appreciate our single-level, single-family homes. We park in our garage and driveway, but may have multiple caregivers coming to the house in one day. There's nowhere for them to park in the street due to a dozen people living in surrounding homes when our neighborhood was designated for single families. Please address your thoughts on this issue.
So first off, I want to go back to SB 9. And for those who are not familiar with it, the state did pass SB 9. It took place this year, and it basically already allows, by right development, of property owners to take a single parcel, split it, and when you couple it with ADU policy at the state level, allows you to suddenly build 4 units. That's why it is something that is directly applicable to what we're seeing happening. And I think when we look at parking, I look at Mira Mesa, especially a lot of the families that we've talked to, families that I know as well. This is a very multi-generational community. It's one that's growing. And parking is definitely a challenge, but I think what that's more indicative of is the challenge that we have from a housing perspective. If you have multiple families, more than the normal typical number of people living in a residence, that's for a particular reason. I think that's something that we need to look at how we're going to address as our city grows. As a city, I think we also need to ensure that we implement policy that makes sense. So a great example with SB 9 is that when they put the policy in place, it does not require parking. And the city actually took the additional step that is allowed in it to require at least one parking space with those additional.
Thank you. Tommy?
South University City is related to a transit corridor. It's not related to SB 9. SB 9 relates to ADUs. SB 9 was essentially the deregulation in Sacramento of single-family housing. It's the end of it. And now, what is the city is proposing in South University City is aggravating the worst components of SB 9. But do not confuse the two. They are different. That's the Indies talking, Ken. That's what downtown is saying. As far as ADUs are concerned, and as far as SB 9 is concerned, I think we addressed some of the concerns earlier. My concern with SB 9 is that it allows predatory speculation to come into single-family zoning. I'm opposed to that. I think we're all opposed to that when you get those cards that say, hi, I'd like to buy your house. That's a developer trying to get a hold of your house because they know they can subdivide the lots at this point. I'm opposed to that. When I'm your council member, I will push back against that as best I can, but SB 9 is a state law, but it's not necessarily related to South UC. But it's a good question. It's important that we clarify that.
Okay.
Well, I really like Tommy's answer, and I think SB 9 is important. I will say that parking, wow, it is so bad where I live. There are 208 units at Marabella, and there are people who have said, can I rent out your parking space, or can I buy your parking space? I have only one. I'm like, why would I? Oh my gosh. And of course, I'm required to clean up any mess on my parking space. So if people do oil spills, and I'm responsible, or I get fined. We have very bad parking here in Mira Mesa, nearby, and I'm just glad we have public transportation. I take it a lot, but I don't recommend it for children at night or adolescents at night.
Thank you. Question will start with Tommy. How would you like to see the multiple species conservation plan applied across District 6, right?
Well, I appreciate it. That's my sweet spot. So the multiple species conservation program is intended in part to ensure that areas, that it includes areas that have been set aside as environmental mitigation for other developments that have been built. So it's an area of land that's not to be utilized, say, for trails. It's not in that matrix. It is to be left alone. And one of the areas where it's being threatened right now in District 6 is in Sereno Valley, is with that office park that's being proposed on the west end of Carroll Canyon. They're talking about building a 4-building office park in a riparian area, against the Mira Mesa community plan, by the way, within a riparian area where you've got endangered species, where you've got wildlife corridors for mule deer. So I think it's atrocious what's being proposed, but again, this is another matter of the city not really having the institutional knowledge at City Hall anymore, protecting our environment, looking out for our open space, and looking out for our multiple species conservation program lands. I will defend those. It's not difficult to do.
Okay.
I agree with Tommy Howell. I just really like what you have to say. I really do. I care a lot about the environment. I mean, what I care about most is God. I love Jesus. And I believe that this world was made by God, and that we have to take care of it. We have to take care of our environment. We have to take care of the animals. We have to take care of the plants and trees. We have a responsibility. But the commandments that I follow are just love the Lord with all my heart, and love my neighbor as myself. And I will say, Tommy, I really like what you have to say.
Thank you. So Tommy already explained what the MSCP policy that we have as a city is, and it's actually one that's fairly robust. It's something that and with the open spaces that we have within San Diego, we could actually be doing more as a city to actually protect and to codify as part of how we deal with those lands. And in fact, as it is at the moment, we are already seeing with the project that Tommy has suggested being moved forward by the city as it stands through the Planning Commission. And so that's just something I think we need to acknowledge, that we're currently working in the confines of how the policy currently exists, and we also have a Planning Commission that can move these things forward. I think in the grand scheme of things, what it means is that we need to be more proactive in terms of how we want to engage our community's voices, especially when it comes to our surrounding spaces. And this is just one example of a place where our input is important. Thank you.
Thank you. Start with Jane. As the district is 40% Asian, how do you think you will best represent those residents?
Well, Salamat po. Thank you very much for asking me that. Do you know that I'm Asian? I am. I'm Chinese, I'm Filipino, and a lot of other things as well. I care a lot about the Filipinos and all the other Asians here. I want to do my best. My mom and my grandfather were born in the Philippines. I do not look Asian, and I'm not allowed to call myself Asian. I'm supposed to call myself Hispanic, but I like being Hispanic as well. I'm part Peruvian, I'm part Spanish. I care a lot about the whole community. It doesn't matter what race. I'm also part Black, I'm also part Arab. I am a mix of everything except Australian. Yeah, too bad. I would have loved Australian, calling myself an Aussie.
Ken?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Obviously, I am someone who is of Asian American descent, and the representation for that community is very important to me. And this is a district that, when it has been redrawn this year, was redrawn to have a 41% Asian American Pacific Islander community. And I will acknowledge, in the last 2 years, that community has faced a lot of challenges. Not only the COVID-19 pandemic, but I think a lot of us saw, especially really amplified last year, unfortunately, by the Atlanta spa shootings, that there has been a significant issue of anti-Asian hate and xenophobia that's been an issue during the pandemic. That's something that I actually helped to lead the coalition here in San Diego, called San Diego Asian Pacific Islander Coalition, that has brought together more than 35 different organizations to respond to issues like that. I've worked to support small businesses. A recent study showed that the Asian American Pacific Islander community actually has a $5 billion economic impact within our community. And a very significant portion of that is specifically within District 6, between Mira Mesa, Serena Valley, and even portions of University City. Thank you.
You know, San Diego, it's an Asian empowerment city. In 2020, we elected Todd Gloria to mayor, the first AAPI mayor that the city's ever had. It's really an amazing thing. Why did San Diegans wind up voting for Todd? Because they felt he was the best candidate possible. I'm confident that our community is going to wind up voting for the best candidate possible as well. I can tell you that a lot of my neighbors in Southeast Mira Mesa are Filipino. Many of them are original homeowners. They came here in the late 1960s after LBJ got rid of a lot of these very racist immigration laws that have been on the books since the 1880s, and in 1965 wound up revising them for the better. And a lot of these Filipino neighbors of ours wound up being some of the first homeowners here in Mira Mesa, when this was truly affordable housing. But many of them are also blue collar, many of them are also working class. The way that many of these families are able to pass along their wealth to their kids and their grandkids is through the assets that they've got in their homes. That's one of the reasons why I say I will defend single-family zoning, because that's the way these families are able to go and pass along wealth. That's very, very important. I'm looking out for our blue-collar and working-class neighbors in this neighborhood for sure in District 6. That's part of the reason I'm running.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to do 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up. Next question is, what is your experience with volunteer work? And we'll start with Ken.
I'm in this race and at the table largely because I come from this community, and I'm a believer that we should have electeds who are rooted in the very communities that they're looking to represent. My wife and I have lived here for the last 15 years, but even before that, I've always been volunteer-minded. I've had an opportunity to serve the community in a number of ways, everything from leading youth leadership development programs throughout San Diego and Carroll counties. I have worked locally as a part of our Mira Mesa Community Planning Group, served on the boards of numerous organizations, everything from UC San Diego's Chancellor's Community Advisory Board, again to the Asian Business Association. And then finally, I think a lot of it is being actively engaged in other ways. For example, one of the events coming up shortly this month is the V6 Neighborhood Fair, formerly the V6 Night Market, and I was proud to be part of the founding team of that event when we brought it here in San Diego. And I think this sense of community service has largely been the driving factor for why I'm here to begin with, and why community members asked me to consider stepping up to run, primarily so that I'd have the opportunity to serve what I consider home. Thank you.
Tommy?
Well, I've been in San Diego for 20 years actually this year, and during that time I've done quite a bit of volunteer work, but currently I serve on the San Diego Lions Club, San Diego Miramar Lions Club, excuse me. That's sort of my current volunteer work that I'm doing right now, but I recently served as the Vice President of Citizens Coordinate for Century 3. That's a planning and development organization. I did that in a volunteer capacity. There's a great deal of volunteer work that I did as part of the Democratic Party. Most notably as the founder of San Diego County Democrats for Environmental Action. I have done enormous amounts of work doing trail maintenance at Cabrillo National Monument. I served as an herpetology monitor there, which means I examined snakes and spiders. It's not as creepy as you think it is. And I also served as a citizen lobbyist for the California State Parks Foundation, looking after a number of our state parks, especially with an emphasis on Anza Borrego Desert State Park and also Torrey Pines as well. So I've done a great deal of environmental work that is primarily geared towards the environment, but it's broadened out to community work with C3 and certainly the San Diego Miramar Lions Club.
Thank you.
Well, I volunteered a lot throughout my life, but I don't always write down how I volunteer. But I first started volunteering when I was at the San Diego Boys and Girls Club in Solana Beach. I grew up in Solana Beach. And they liked me so much that they named me the first young lady of the year for 1977. I just kept giving my best because I love giving my best. They're great people. And then they told me to be at the awards ceremony in the beginning of 1981, and I told them I had other things to do, but they wanted me to be there. And so I showed up, and then they named me Young Lady of the Year again, 1980. And I'm the only one who has that recognition twice. I also volunteered at Palomar College when I was a scholar. I volunteered with our Phi Theta Kappa and our Alpha Gamma Sigma International Honor Society and Statewide Honor Society. I was membership secretary for Phi Theta Kappa. I was appointed secretary for Alpha Gamma Sigma. I also volunteered at Escondido High School. I volunteered with the girls' JV tennis team. And I also have volunteered a lot for Marabella. I was on the HOA a lot of years, treasurer, secretary. Thank you.
And last question, we'll start with Tommy. City council is an elected position, not executive. Each council member has one vote. Please expand on how you will convince these other council members to vote in support of projects in this district.
Well, for starters, I'm going to do so by leading and by setting an example and raising my voice and doing the same thing that I do right now as a member of the San Diego County Planning Commission. I am the only environmentalist on a board filled with developers. So believe me, I have a lot to say. I ask questions that no one else asks. I like to pump the brakes and say, are we sure we want to be going in this direction or not? And what I want to see is an activated city council that is serving as a counterweight to the mayor. Let's not forget that under strong mayor in 2005, the mayor no longer was essentially a ninth council member anymore. And so we have got to have a city council that's not always agreeing with everything that the mayor says if they don't agree with it. Likewise, if the mayor is proposing good policy, we should find ways to support it and have a truly effective government. But I'm going to lead by raising my voice, by stepping on the brakes, and by bringing up a lot of the issues that we've been talking about tonight that never seem to get brought up in council meetings and never seem to get brought up by city staff who do not have term limits. Council members do. I'm going to lead.
Okay?
Again, I really like Tommy's answer. He's awesome. It really is. I mean, what will really floor me is if in November I'm running against Tommy Howe, I'd be like, whoa. And I said, Tommy's gone to 7,000 doors. Well, I'll see if I can go to 14,000. I mean, this is awesome. If I'm on the city council, I'll do my best to talk and to email and to phone call. I get a lot done by email. I believe we're working as a team and treating other people really well. So I do my best to work to treat the mayor and his council members very well. Thank you.
Yeah, I think in order to accomplish what we need for our district, it requires multiple things. One is that you do have to build a relationship. Given the way that our council is structured and the way the mayor's office is structured, we have to build a relationship in order to be able to fight and negotiate for the things that we need. We also need to make sure that we have someone who brings values to the table, values that can be representative of the community, and that ensure that those values can be reflected in how we fight. As much as you've heard, I mean, this council is not one, we've seen it in the news a lot in the last 2 years, despite being heavily nonpartisan, has actually been one that has not agreed in many ways. And it shows just how important that we don't just come up with great policy at the end of the day, but we figure out how do we translate and communicate with our constituents and our neighbors, how do we deliver that at City Hall, but how do we also ultimately accomplish the 5 or the 6 votes that we need to deliver what we need back at home. And I think that's a really critical component of it. I am proud at the moment to be endorsed by our mayor, as well as 2/3 of the city council, not because they just like me as an individual, but because they know that I'm going to be asking hard questions of them, that we're going to be able to work with each other, despite our differences, and accomplish what we think is going to move our city forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to closing statements. We'll do this in reverse orders. We'll start with Ken. 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just going to take a moment to thank both Jane and Tommy for being here tonight, but then also really to everyone here in the audience. I think it's really important, and for me it's just been heartening to see all of your faces in person for tonight's forum. Really, as you've heard from me, I'm coming to the table with a sort of sense of collaboration. Knowing that as a city, we are facing some of the greatest challenges at this time, especially coming on the heels of the pandemic, with a structural budget deficit that we need to be able to address. And I believe that means that we need to have voices at City Hall that are going to be representative of our community, that are going to be able to fight for the resources that we need, and ultimately look to get the job done. I'm not a politician. I think hopefully tonight you can already get a sense of that. At the end of the day, I'm a dad. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old sitting at home, which certainly makes campaigning at this time really interesting. We're a household with 2 working parents, trying to ensure that we can keep a roof over our head and support our family. And at the end of the day, those are the values that I think I'm going to bring to the table. I'm not here to deliver you great sound bites. I'm not here to simply tell you what you want to hear or make promises that I can't keep. What I'm here to do is ensure that I'm going to fight to represent you, and also fight to ensure that we get the job done when it comes to being at City Hall. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I have shared, we're fortunate to have received a lot of support. I am the endorsed Democratic candidate in this race. And ultimately, I hope to earn your support, not just as neighbors, but as folks who clearly, by coming out tonight, have demonstrated how much you care about moving San Diego forward. So thank you again. My name is Kent Lee. I'm running for San Diego City Council to represent District 6. And if you have a moment afterwards, I'm happy to chat with each of you individually, or even in the weeks and months ahead. So thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Ken?
Thank you. Barry Landry Voss, thank you so much. You're so awesome. Even when I met you in 2014, so awesome. Thank you so much. And boy, I tell you, sitting next to Tommy Howe, I feel like, wow, radiant personality. This guy's awesome. And Ken, great guy. Thank you. Nice to meet you. Now, I want to know I am very supportive of our military. I am thankful that in our district is Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. I would not be here today without our U.S. military. On December 7th, 1941, after my mother and her parents attended Mass at church in the Philippines, they were told that Pearl Harbor was bombed. They went to hide in the mountains. They were rescued by the U.S. military. They were skin and bones when they were rescued. My mother and maternal grandfather were born in the Philippines. Grandfather was Filipino, Chinese, and Spanish. My mom is a U.S. citizen now. All of our heroes and sheroes who protect us, save us, they heal us. They should not have to get vaccinated for COVID-19. Nurses, doctors, paramedics, firemen, firewomen, police, we need them, we need to respect them. If there's a vaccine passport in our city, many people may go elsewhere to do business, like to Del Mar or Solana Beach, where they won't be required to show a vaccine passport. Let's care more. Let's love the city of San Diego. Let's care more. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Tom?
Well, it was great seeing everyone tonight, and I want to thank the Mira Mesa Town Council as well for putting this on. I want to thank all of you for coming out here this evening as well. It's marvelous to be doing this in person again, and I hope you'll all make it out tomorrow night to the Union Tribune Forum that's going to be held at the Kearney Mesa Library. That's going to be happening tomorrow evening at 6:30, so I hope you can make it. And I want to thank my fellow candidates, Jane and Kent as well, and thank you, Jeff, for moderating. You know, if you think things are going okay downtown, then you've got a candidate, because they're waving the sky in. If you're concerned about the housing issues that we have, if you're concerned about our staffing issues across the board here in the city, if you're concerned about the lack of true investment in permanent supportive housing and truly addressing our homeless crisis, I've got some concerns, and I'm going to bring those to council, and I'm going to do so with the wisdom to vote on citywide matters that affect all of us. When in radio, they often tell you, don't tell people what you're not, but I'll tell you what, I'm not interested in being part of the scenery. I'm not going to spend my time hiding out in my office. I'm not a technocrat. I want to continue being a voice for this community, whether they're rebuilding Gold Coast, whether they're finally finishing Carroll Canyon Road. I'm going to be out there celebrating with you, and I'm going to be acting like a hawk to make sure that pure water gets accomplished appropriately. And look at what I've accomplished. Okay, we're working with the Mira Mesa Town Council and Supervisor Tara Lawson-Reamer's office. We were actually able to go and transfer ownership and operation of the epicenter from the city, who let that facility decay, who let this marvelous center for kids and a cultural center for the community, and we got that transferred to the county, and now they're putting $7 million into it. We were able to go and beat back those lane realignments, those bicycle lane changes on Gold Coast Drive. We did that in 2 weeks. We beat City Hall. I've got a record of results. I was the endorsed Democratic candidate for this seat in 2018, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you more about this campaign. I'm endorsed by the Sierra Club, the League of Conservation Voters. I believe my time is my time wrapped up. I apologize. Anyway, I look forward to speaking with you afterwards. Thank you so much. It's great seeing everyone.
And a big time for all of our candidates. We want to thank you very much for coming. I'll turn it back over to Mira.
So one more time, I want to thank Jeff Stevens, who does a magnificent job every time moderating. He's our go-to person for this. Thank you. To our candidates, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for telling us how you're going to help our community move forward, be better, improve all of our issues, and relate to the rest of the city and get our fair share. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out to our first in-person event since March of 2020. So good to see all of you in person. Our meetings going forward will be in person. We may be doing kind of a hybrid with Facebook. We're going to let you know what we'll do with that. We definitely welcome you to come out. I want to thank Mira Mesa High School for making the theater available to us, for all the work they're doing to make this happen. The Food Nutrition Club, they reminded me that there's still food and drink out there for you on the way out the door. Be safe. Be back next month to see us. Have a wonderful evening.
I made eye contact with them
Well,
most
I
of the
know
time.
it's not that. I'm an interpreter, so I read everything constantly. I'm an interpreter for the devil, so I'm always constantly paying attention to the environment.
I also don't want my hands.